The palace is already burning. Flames rip through Persepolis, devouring halls filled with gold and tribute. Metal runs in the heat. Cedar beams snap and collapse. This isn't a battle. This is how a civilization ends. Just hours earlier, Alexander the Great had taken the city. No final stand, no last defense. Persia didn't fall in these flames. It had already fallen. So why burn it? Revenge. For what Persia once did to Greece? Or something colder? An attempt to erase an empire from memory itself. Tonight, an empire ends. An empire from Egypt to India, now reduced to fire and ash. But history doesn't end here, because Persia did not die in this fire, not in defeat, not with its king gone. So, if an empire can lose everything, why does it refuse to die? He was young, relentless, and already unstoppable. When Alexander the Great crossed into Persian lands, he wasn't just invading a kingdom, he was walking into the heart of the largest empire the world had ever seen. For generations, the Persian kings had ruled from the Mediterranean to the edges of India. Their power was absolute. Their name, untouchable. Until it wasn't. At the Battle of Issus, everything began to crack. The Persian army, led by Darius III himself, stretched across the battlefield vast, confident, certain of victory. This was supposed to be the moment the invader would be crushed, the moment Persia would remind the world who truly ruled. But the line broke. Alexander didn't hesitate. He drove straight for the king, through chaos, through collapsing ranks, through men who had never imagined defeat. He cut his way toward Darius. And in that moment, something unthinkable happened. The great king ran, not strategically, not tactically. He fled. And with him, the illusion of Persian invincibility shattered. It wasn't just a lost battle. It was the beginning of the end. What followed was not resistance, but collapse. City after city fell. The empire that once commanded nations could no longer defend itself. Its armies scattered, its authority dissolved. And then, Alexander reached Persepolis. This was no ordinary city. This was the ceremonial heart of Persia. A symbol carved in stone and gold. A place built not just to rule, but to be remembered forever. And then it burned. Flames climbed its columns. Roofs collapsed into fire. Treasures melted into nothing. The weight of centuries reduced to ash in a single night. Whether it was vengeance or a drunken decision, no one can say for certain. But the message was clear. This was not conquest. This was erasure. Not just of a city, not just of a king, but of an entire empire's identity. The pride of Persia crushed. Its legacy set on fire. Its memory meant to disappear. And as the flames consumed what remained of its glory, it seemed as though history itself was being rewritten without them. Persia had fallen. Or at least, that's what the world believed. He was young, relentless, already unstoppable. When Alexander the Great crossed into Persian lands, he wasn't invading a kingdom. He was walking into the largest empire on earth. For generations, Persia had ruled from the Mediterranean to the edges of India. Kings bowed, nations paid. It felt eternal, until it wasn't. At the Battle of Issus, the illusion shattered. The Persian army filled the field vast, confident, certain of victory. This was where the invader would be crushed. But Alexander didn't slow down. He drove straight through the center, through chaos, through collapsing ranks, straight toward the king. And then, something happened. No Persian had ever imagined. Darius III ran. Not a retreat, not a strategy. He fled. And in that moment, something far greater than a battle was lost. The idea of Persian invincibility shattered. After Issus, resistance didn't collapse all at once. It unraveled. Cities opened their gates before he even arrived. Armies scattered. Authority dissolved into silence. The empire that once commanded the world could no longer defend itself. And then he reached Persepolis. This was not just a city. It was Persia itself, carved in stone, layered in gold, built to outlast time. And then it burned. Flames climbed its columns. Roofs gave way. The night turned into a furnace. Treasures that took generations to build, gone in hours. Whether it was vengeance or something more reckless, no one can say for certain. But the message was unmistakable. This was not conquest. This was erasure. Not just of a capital, not just of a king, but of an empire's identity. Its pride crushed. Its legacy set on fire. Its memory meant to disappear. Persia had fallen, or at least, that's what the world believed. And they were wrong. The empire should have died with the flames of Persepolis. It didn't. Centuries passed. Kingdoms rose and vanished. The heirs of Alexander the Great faded into history. But Persia returned, not as a memory, as a rival. Under the Sasanian Empire, the East rose again, disciplined, ambitious, and determined to reclaim what had been lost. Their kings no longer ruled beneath the shadow of old Persia. They ruled as emperors. And across the western horizon stood the only power large enough to challenge them, Roman Empire. And then the wars began. Not one war, centuries of them. East against West, empire against empire, neither willing to kneel. Roman legions vanished into eastern deserts. Persian cavalry thundered through mountain passes and across shattered frontiers. Cities changed hands again and again. Borders moved like scars carved into the earth. And for the first time since Alexander, Persia was no longer the empire being conquered. It had become Rome's equal. Sometimes, Rome was the one bleeding. In 260 AD, the impossible happened. The Roman Emperor Valerian marched east to crush Persia once and for all. Instead, he was captured alive by the Sasanian king Shapur I, a Roman emperor, taken prisoner, humiliated before the world. No enemy had ever done that before. For Rome, it was humiliation. For Persia, it was revenge centuries in the making. But the wars never ended. When Rome fractured, the Eastern Empire survived as the Byzantine Empire, and still the fighting continued. Year after year, generation after generation. Fortresses burned. Armies disappeared in snowstorms. Entire cities starved behind collapsing walls. Emperors rose promising victory and vanished into defeat. Neither empire could destroy the other, but neither empire could stop. Because this was no longer just war, it was survival. Rome believed itself eternal. Persia refused to disappear, and across centuries of bloodshed, both empires bled themselves dry trying to prove which civilization deserved to survive history. By the early 7th century, the war reached its final fury. The Sasanian king Khosrow II pushed deeper into Byzantine lands than any Persian ruler in generations. Syria fell. Egypt fell. Even Jerusalem was taken. For a moment, it looked like Persia had broken Rome, but endless war leaves nothing untouched. And neither empire realized they were already dying. The wars had never truly ended. For centuries, Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Empire had torn each other apart city by city, army by army, generation after generation. By the early 7th century, both empires were exhausted. Treasuries emptied, fields abandoned, entire provinces shattered by war, plague, and famine. Kings demanded more soldiers, more taxes, more blood, but there was almost nothing left to give. And then, from the deserts of Arabia, a new force emerged. Not a kingdom, not another rival empire, something different. Under Islam, the tribes became an army, and the old world was already dying. The first blows struck the exhausted armies of Persia. Battle after battle chipped away at what remained of Sasanian power. But the true disaster came at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. There, the Persian army broke, not just defeated, broken. The empire that had fought Rome for centuries could no longer hold the line. Ancient cities opened their gates, one after another. Governors fled. Noble families abandoned lands that had belonged to Persia for generations. The empire rebuilt after Alexander the Great began collapsing from within. And then came the final blow. At the Battle of Nahavand, remembered by later Muslims as the victory of victories, the remaining strength of the Sasanian Empire was crushed. After that, there was no recovery, no resurgence, no return. The last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III, fled east as his empire disappeared behind him. Province after province slipped away until the empire that had once challenged Rome itself existed only in fragments and memory. But this was more than military defeat. This was the end of an age. The old Persian state collapsed. Zoroastrian fire temples faded. The conquerors did not just take land, they reshaped it. Arabic spread across lands once ruled by Persian kings. Islam replaced the faith that had stood at the center of Persian identity for centuries. Power changed. Religion changed. The world changed. And yet, Persia still refused to vanish, because even after conquest, something survived beneath the ruins. Its language, its culture, its memory. The empire was gone, but Persia was not. And over time, the land the ancient world once called Persia, the world would it know by another name, Iran. For centuries, Persia fell again and again, first to Alexander the Great, then to Rome, then to the armies rising from Arabia. Its capitals burned to ash, its kings vanished, its empires collapsed one after another, and every time, it seemed like the story was over. But it never truly ended, because Persia was never just an empire. It was a civilization, and civilizations do not survive because their armies win. They survive because their identity refuses to disappear. The rulers changed, the religion changed, the language of power changed. But beneath every conquest, Persia endured, in language, in memory, in the people who carried it forward long after its empires turned to dust. And over time, the ancient land once known as Persia, the world would know it as Iran. The name changed, the empires fell, but the civilization remained. Empire burn, kings fall, but some civilizations refuse to die.